Hi, Matt. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Fortunately, I had to work today, so Dr. Shaw and Dr. Riera from Yale will be facilitating just because I'll be in and out
Okay.
uh, of the conversation. So, but I'll still be listening in. But they'll be the ones facilitating. But I wanted to thank you for presenting, though.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for organizing this educational collaborative. I think it's a really an amazing, place to get in and learn from each other. So it's a great idea.
Yeah, no, thank you. It came from COVID. It started really small with a group here in the Northeast, and then it kind of grew. But like collaborations like from you, it definitely helps. So that way we kind of all remain interested. So Dr. Shah, who's there right there, and Dr. Riero, they'll be the ones that will be like facilitating the discussion. I'll be present, but I guess I'll be in and out. So that's why I asked them if they can facilitate the lecture.
Sure.
The other thing is usually we wait till like 1:05 to let people like log in, and then
Yeah.
they'll introduce you, and so they'll take over from there.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep. And thank you, Rahul and Antonio, for facilitating.
No problem. Hope all is well.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
What is our stop time, or just to make sure I know what time I'm supposed to end by?
So usually I set up for an hour block, but you can end a little before that. That's fine. And also, if you decide if it's creating a lot of discussion, I have a 1.5 hour block. But usually around an hour. That's when we play. But there have been times that they've gone over, so don't worry about it if you go over.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, no, I think I'm under an hour, but I just wanted to make sure. Thanks.
Yeah, that's completely fine. Yeah. I initially designed it to be 30 to 45 minutes, but then everyone kind of went over to an hour. So then that's when I switched the time.
Perfect. And you do emergency medicine and pediatric emergency medicine, Henry?
No, just pediatric emergency medicine, just PEM.
Just PEM. Okay. Were you trained in both or just PEM?
Just PEM.
Okay. I think I read something that made me think maybe you were trained in both, but maybe I read wrong. So obviously. Are you guys able to see my PowerPoint right now? I think I may have just messed it up.
No, I can't. Yeah, you're not sharing screen anymore.
Hold on. Can you see it now? Okay.
Yep, you're good.
Okay.
And restart time. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and get this started since it's 1:05. We have Dr. Steimle here from the University of Utah, and it sounds like he's going to be talking to us about some focus strategies. Really, I think that get to the heart of some logistical issues that come up when it comes to integrating a focus program. And so we're looking forward to hearing about his experience at the primary children's hospital across the country at Utah. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Hey, Antonio, if there's any questions that come up, can you let me know? I've kind of closed my chat box just because it's hard for, I'm not super great at managing all these things. So
sounds like a plan.
All
Yep,
right.
we got you.
Perfect. So I don't have any disclosures to go over. My objectives, as mentioned, are kind of to discuss different strategies of POCUS implementation, sustainability, collaboration, and evolution within your own institution. I'll be sharing my experience at Primary Children's Hospital, and then we formed a group, the POCUS Consortium, which I will talk about. We'll briefly discuss POCUS in other divisions at our hospital, the NICU and the PICU. Briefly discuss the future of POCUS at PCH. Discuss some strategies to make POCUS accessible to other institutions, communities, and underserved populations, to help others build their POCUS programs. Really talk about using learners to provide POCUS outreach. Here we use the Global Rural Underserved Child Healthcare Fellows and the PEM Fellows, the pediatric residents, the tribal, rural, and underserved medical students. And then a little bit about working with partner sites to build POCUS programs and train POCUS champions. I always think the lectures that are more discussion than just pure didactics are better. So if you do have some questions, please chime in. I do have quite a few slides. I did leave a nice section of time, I think, at the end for questions, but if there are some questions that come up, Antonio will let us know. I did emergency medicine residency, and then a PEM fellowship, and then an ultrasound fellowship. Since about 2015, I have been here at Primary Children's. I've been the ultrasound director since 2015. And we formed the Primary Children's Hospital POCUS Consortium in 2018. So today's format may be slightly different. Most of the cases are autobiographical cases, kind of describing my journey, experience in building a POCUS program. They're not necessarily correct or incorrect. They're just what I did. And I imagine a lot of people have done similar things. A lot of amazing documents have come out in the last 5 to 6 years that I don't think were around, back when I started, and definitely not back when some of you started, back in the 2000s and 2010. So a lot has changed, which we're grateful for. A lot of people that may be watching this probably have more expertise and experience in publications on these topics than myself. So I'm definitely humbled to know that those people might be watching or listening, and definitely defer to their expertise. Every hospital and every facility has a different culture, different administration, leadership, and practice patterns with regard to POCUS. So everyone has to take that into account with their, their facility and work within those boundaries. So case number one was around June of 2014 when I started to interview for after a POCUS fellowship, kind of into early 2015. So case number one, an ultrasound fellow has just completed a PEM and ED ultrasound fellowship and is considering working at 4 possible hospitals. Which one to choose? Hospital A has multiple ultrasound machines in the ED, a strong ultrasound program with strong ultrasound faculty, strong ultrasound fellowship, many expert ultrasound faculty, is very well developed with lots of resources. Hospital B has some of the above, but is not quite as developed. Hospital C has some of the above, but is even less developed, and Hospital D has even less of the above. So I'd be curious to know what people would pick here as you're completing a fellowship, which one you would choose. I chose Hospital D largely for other reasons than ultrasound, but I started Primary Children's February of 2015, and they had 1 machine with a linear probe, no ultrasound director, a few faculty that had some POCUS education and training, but not really using it except for maybe an occasional cellulitis or abscess. They had no POCUS privileging pathways, no POCUS quality assurance. So where do you go from there? Where to begin and how to develop a POCUS training program? This was early 2015. So I think a lot of people and ultrasound leaders, you get this great ultrasound education, whether it be through a fellowship or a conference. But the real barrier is often when you get back to your institution or to your new institution, how do you implement this? What do you do beyond the course or after your POCUS fellowship? So you finish your training, where do you go? Do you stay where you're at, where you're comfortable with, which is likely well developed if it's somewhere that has an ultrasound fellowship, or do you go somewhere that's not as well established? And then how do you implement this and keep it progressing as you move forward? So many of us have, good education, knowledge, and skill, but there are a lot of barriers to implementing this, and it can be challenging. And there are often several hurdles that I'm sure everyone has faced. I imagine, the hurdles in 2005 were probably much harder than they were in 2010. And, I think, each 5 years or so, they're probably getting less and less as this is becoming more developed and we have more literature. But really, it's about becoming a successful hurdler, how to, overcome these obstacles, move out of the way of these obstacles, work with these obstacles to build a program. So this is case number 2. This is kind of April 2015, really throughout 2015. But so this new POCUS graduate fellow starts at this hospital and wants to establish. How should this be accomplished? Should he use ACEP guidelines, use AAP guidelines, ask colleagues, use his fellowship experience as a template, or all of the above? And he basically did all of the above. Luckily, we had some good documents that came out in 2015. Actually, April 2015, I think, was the policy the AAP released. But what he did is, he referred to this book that he had from fellowship, Emergency Ultrasound, Mon Mateer, from 2008, which was very helpful, kind of outlined how to establish a point of care ultrasound program, determine the type of exams to be performed, developed a program plan, select the point of care ultrasound director, obtain approval of the program plan, acquire an ultrasound machine, train the ultrasound director, if not already trained, train the group, perform problem solving, and ongoing training, retention, and evolution. All right, so kind of continuing on. So what did this person do? So he met regularly with his PEM division chief to start building a POCUS program, writing drafts and proposals for establishing PEM POCUS program curriculum for the PEM fellows, obtaining an ultrasound machine that had 4 probes, that had PACS capability, meeting with other program directors nearby in the adult ED, using documents experience from colleagues from Ultrasound Fellowship, hearing about the P2 network back in 2015, which I think it was not nearly as well developed as it appears to be now, and kind of reached out to some of these doctors on the P2 network via email and survey. Additionally, met regularly with the pediatric department chair and chief medical officer, Department of Pediatrics, PEM division chief, and also with the chairman of the Department of Medical Imaging to work out a plan for implementation and having discussion. So a sample survey was sent by email to several of the people on the P2 network. It said something like, my name is Matt Steimle and I'm the new ultrasound director at Primary Children's Hospital. I completed an ultrasound fellowship in 2014. We are creating and building an ultrasound program. We have already created an ultrasound curriculum for our fellows. I would really appreciate if you could answer my questions below. Please feel free to give any advice on any of the below questions or any other questions that are not mentioned. And maybe some of you on this that are watching were some of the people that responded or saw this email that I sent out. So the survey had 15 questions, which I'll talk about. I got nine people responded, 7 children's hospitals responded, 2 adult hospitals responded. And it kind of shows you, I think, where things were in 2015. Do you have an ultrasound machine in the pediatric ED that PEM physicians can use? And most of them had something, as you can see there, the responses. Do they use it for clinical decision-making? I like this one. Sometimes, only a few, infrequently. And a few said yes. How do they document the ultrasound examination? And there's various answers here in the paper chart. QPath, not sure. People are working on trying to figure this out. Some of them were using paper ultrasound templates, CD-ROMs or USBs. So really all over the place. How do you give them ultrasound privileges to perform ultrasound examinations? You can see the different answers here. Hospital credentialing, trying to determine this now. I don't know, or I do not. Different answers. How do you get the PEM physicians credentialed? Trying to determine this now. No process currently, with great difficulty. Number 6, in your department, who grants the ultrasound privileges? For the most part, EM or PEM or administration, similar to privileges. Who provides the quality assurance? For the most part, it's all PEM. The plan is that POCUS team will. EM and PEM Sono faculty, no current process. How do you document the scans and put them in the, kind of talked about this one earlier. We have space on Mac server, CD-ROM, USB. What quality assurance do you use? You can see the different answers here. No current process. How often do you perform quality assurance? Most of them said weekly, a few of them said monthly. Who is in charge of this? A PEM physician, such as the ultrasound director, someone else, such as the radiology department, or is there collaboration between departments? And you can see the different answers here. It's mostly, a few of them say no current process, PEM ultrasound director. I like the one on the bottom. We hired a college graduate who works 40 hours per week, organizing ultrasound images and linking them to physicians who perform them and preparing them for formal QA, plus the ultrasound faculty. Do you have a PEM ultrasound director? Most of them did. 3 of them, or a few of them did not. No, only have an EM ultrasound director. No, it's an adult ED only. Does the director have additional help, such as an assistant director? Do they have secretarial support? Different answers here. 1 co-director, 1 secretary shared with others. No current process. How many scans must be done by a PEM physician to be credentialed? Not sure. Different answers, 10 to 25. How are these scans documented? We kind of talked about that. 3-ring binder with patient labels. So after this survey, I definitely felt that it was kind of clear as mud back in 2015 on how to kind of go about these things, and definitely felt some of these feelings that I'm sure physicians who did this back in 2005 or 2010 felt. At that point in time here at Primary Children, our fellows were still getting most of their POCUS education at an outside adult hospital. We were able to make a PEM POCUS curriculum in July of 2015. Eventually, we were able to get approved to get a ultrasound machine that had 4 probes, and we got that in spring of 2016. And then by July of 2016, most PEM POCUS training is now in-house. Close this here. All right. So luckily, in the last several years, there's been a lot of great documents that have come out, very helpful resources. I'm just going to review them very briefly. This was a huge one that I think really enabled us to be able to show this to leaders and administrators at our hospital, this AAP policy statement that came out. I'm just going to highlight a few things that it talks about here. It is important for pediatric emergency medicine physicians caring for patients in the emergency department to receive adequate and continued point of care ultrasonography training for those indications used in their practice setting. Emergency departments should have credentialing and quality assurance programs. PEM fellowships should provide appropriate training to physician trainees. Hospitals should provide privileges to physicians who demonstrate competency in point of care ultrasound. Ongoing research will provide the necessary measures to define the optimal training and competency assessment standards. Requirements for credentialing and hospital privileges will vary and will be specific to individual departments and hospitals. As more physicians are trained and more research is completed, there should be one national standard for credentialing and privileging in point of care ultrasound for PEM physicians. You know, they highlight several great things: getting a core group of individuals with expertise in point of care ultrasound. This group is responsible for educating faculty and trainees, as well as managing administrative tasks, credentialing pathways, etc. Talks about how the American Board of Pediatrics now has a requirement for PEM fellowship programs to provide education. It briefly talks about, you know, suggesting 25 to 50 examinations needed to achieve competency. However, physicians should not interpret this recommendation as a one-size-fits-all. Another document that came out in 2016 that I found very helpful was this document. And it's kind of a how-to, it says, to date, there is no standard guideline for the practice of point of care ultrasound for the specialty. This document serves as an initial step in a detailed how-to and description of individual point of care ultrasound examinations. Pediatric emergency medicine providers should refer to this paper as a reference for published research, etc. For reporting guidelines. They mentioned a couple really great things. To develop this document, we assembled a group of thought leaders and content experts to review the scientific literature and use it to formulate evidence-based statements about emergency POCUS. For this initial effort, we assembled members of the Pediatric Emergency POCUS Work Group, which wrote the recently published POCUS guidelines for pediatric emergency physicians, with collaborations from additional content experts in the field who had either completed an ultrasound fellowship or specialty training in pediatric emergency POCUS. We sought to create a comprehensive document summarizing the current evidence. This document was fantastic. I actually, not until recently, had read and reviewed this one, but this one is really good. You know, they provide examples of POCUS on free online education. They talk about these two pathways, the training-based pathway and the practice-based pathway to become credentialed. And they kind of have a nice little table here showing those. They made this nice chart, you know, kind of recommending different numbers, which was helpful. Regarding QA, they talk about depending on the volume of examinations performed within a department, at a minimum, examinations should be reviewed weekly with the goal of reviewing examinations every 1 to 2 days. They talk about a faculty credentialing program for POCUS should be supported by the department or division leadership and hospital administration. And they have some conclusions. Basically, all faculty should be competent in the core applications of POCUS. They have guidelines for competency and benchmarks and a framework. And this is really just an excellent paper for building a POCUS program that came out in 2019. You know, there's a lot of wonderful resources that have really been evolving and developing over the years, such as the P2 network that has all these great articles to guide people who are learning and building programs. I think this educational collaborative is a great resource that that we can all benefit from, learning from each other on a national level or multinational level. All right, case number 3. In 2017 to 2018, you were approached by a PICU and a NICU colleague. They each ask you for advice on how to start or build a POCUS program in their own divisions. What do you say or do? A, good luck, it is a lot of work. B, are you sure you want to do that? C, are you a good hurdler? D, this is what I did. These are the resources that I use. Let's start to meet and work out a plan to help you build a POCUS program, help mentor them. So you may think A, B, and C, but ultimately I think most of us would pick D to try to help our colleagues. This NICU provider was mentored for approximately 1 year while acquiring skills, knowledge, and attending courses. She is now the ultrasound medical director of the NICU and mentoring several of her colleagues, as well as building a strong POCUS program for her fellows and faculty. The PICU provider was already excellent at POCUS. However, he just needed some guidance with developing privileging documents and needed some mentoring to navigate these infrastructural issues and barriers and hurdles. And now he as well has a strong POCUS program for his fellows and faculty. Both have created privileging and quality assurance pathways, as well as curriculums for their fellows and faculty.
Can I actually quickly ask, when it comes to the privileging and QA pathways that were established from the NICU and PICU programs, were those heavily based off of the ones that you'd already created? That's a question, I guess, for you and for everybody else, for other institutions that have multiple different sections or divisions using POCUS. If the ED already has one branch for privileging and QA, do you guys tend to sort of model off of one another in one shared document, or are these entirely separate entities?
So I can answer, and then I'd love to hear what the group has to say. But basically, the NICU and PICU pretty much used my document. I think they changed the wording a little bit because they didn't really need an eFast application because they don't really use it in that way. I think they may have even said free abdominal focus assessment for free fluid of the abdomen or something like that, like a FAF exam. But for the most part, I think they just copied and pasted about 98% of what I had done, maybe 90%, and they were able to use that. We actually, this last year, we were asked by our medical administration privileging to kind of collaborate, the three of us, the NICU, PICU, and myself, to make a document that could kind of be a template for in Utah Intermountain hospitals. There's a lot of Intermountain hospitals, probably like 100 of them, and to kind of be a template for Intermountain. And so we, over the last year, we did kind of revise our document. It's basically very similar for all three departments, but we were able to work together, and now that privileging pathway document for the ED, PICU, and NICU is going to be shared with other Intermountain hospitals. So that's how we were able to do it here. But I'd love to hear how people have done it in their programs.
As far as I know, I mean, we here at Yale, we don't have any other sections within pediatrics that are currently using, well, there are other programs that are using POCUS. I'm not sure if rheumatology or I don't know that they have like specific QA or privileging pathways. Certainly emergency medicine, which is a different sort of department here, has their privileging and QA pathway as well, though.
So I pose this question: how can we make this complex process easier and smoother and more collaborative? You know, when I first, you know, back, I don't know, maybe when I was an EM resident back in like the 2010, 2011, it did sometimes feel like we tried to stay in our sandbox, and there was a lot of concern of, you know, stepping on people's toes, and it seemed like there were boundary issues with, you know, different things more than. I think we've evolved quite a bit over the last several years that I feel like we're all getting along and collaborating better. I often would hear about this AMA, you know, back then, this AMA policy of how we're all should be able to do ultrasounds and work through that. But really the theme, one of the big themes I hope to share with this talk is that I think through collaboration, you know, we don't have to draw these lines in the sand, and we can kind of work together and mutually help each other as we go into the future. And I think there's a synergistic effect, you know, working with your other divisions in your institution and to find pathways to, you know, obtain privileges and education, and you can help each other and benefit from each other. And that's really what I hope that that's one of the messages that I hope to convey. All right, so we were able, after, you know, kind of meeting with these NICU and PICU doctors, we decided to kind of make a conference to really help train the NICU and PICU doctors and their fellows. And we were able to do one of these in 2018, 19, and 21. We didn't do it in 20 because of COVID, but about 20 fellows and faculty were able to get kind of trained in the basics. And it's been a great collaboration that we've been able to help the NICU and the PICU. Around that same time period, we kind of realized there could be benefit from collaborating more, and we created this idea of a consortium where we would meet together. We made this mission statement: through multi-specialty and administrative collaboration, we will use point-of-care ultrasound to optimize patient care. We will provide leadership to advance POCUS through education and training, quality assurance, research, technology advancement, administration, and clinical practice. The different members of the POCUS consortium were 3 doctors from PEM, 1 doctor from NICU, 1 doctor from PICU. Anyone else in the hospital is welcome to come. We've had a few different specialties come here and there a little bit, like some hospitalists and nephrology. We have the radiology is present. Our radiology department director is on there, and then our lead sonography educator comes to that. We have one of our medical executive directors who comes to offer administrative support. And then not that often, but once in a while, a division chief or a fellowship director will come to that. And we've been fortunate that we've been able to use our administrative assistants in these different divisions in the PICU, NICU, and PEM to kind of divide the calendaring and the minute taking, and to kind of share some of these responsibilities. We meet our items and minutes and follow up on them. I'm going to share some examples in a minute, but for the most part, these are the different things that we've talked about the last 3 years at our POCUS consortium, and you can see they're really all the things that you guys probably have to talk about or think about often. So just some example from some minutes. I've kind of blocked out some of the names as I didn't make sure everybody was okay with me using their name, but we often will talk about, this is from minutes from January of 2020, talk about training, credentialing, administrative privileging issues. This was back when we were helping the NICU and PICU kind of work through their privileging pathway documents. We talk about CME, you know how many hours of CME should be obtained every 2 years. We talk about simulation products and problems with simulation products, and in this meeting, one of the doctors asked if some of the ER doctors were stepping outside of the lines. As you guys have probably seen, I would imagine that there's some creep every once in a while where people may be using ultrasound for indications that are not perhaps the standard of care. We talk about, all these quality assurance things and different things that we can say to families when we're, going to ask them if we can do an educational scan. There's just so many issues that come up, and talking about these mutually, with the different divisions as we all are hurdling these issues, I think has been really helpful and supportive. And we talk about global and rural health and medical student education and educational scholarship and upcoming conferences and grand rounds. We did a grand rounds back in 2019 and talked about maintenance issues with machines and upcoming conferences, credentialing issues, and simulation issues. And recently our nephrologists were kind of wanting to build a POCUS program, so we were talking about how to help them. And so anyway, I think this POCUS consortium has been really helpful for us as we've been able to collaborate and learn together and grow together. We're still trying to determine write up about this, how it's helpful. Some of our preliminary findings I'm going to talk about here in a second, but I think as this evolves over the next several years, I think this is going to be very beneficial for all that are involved. It also helps to keep us transparent and on the same page with our Department of Radiology colleagues and the administrative people in the hospital as well. This is kind of a preprint that we wrote up based off of our conferences in this consortium. And I'm just going to kind of talk about one paragraph that I think is really important. I'm not going to go into this too much, but really the point of this paper was to determine if kind of collaboration and the POCUS consortium and these conferences were helpful. And this paragraph from the discussion, I just want to kind of go through. It says the offsite or online courses historically, so when people go offsite or go online, that's traditionally in the past, a lot of people have been trained that way over the last 20 years. The offsite or online courses historically are unable to address the institutional barriers of integrating POCUS into daily practice. Prior to our on-site course, we identified similar barriers from the 2018 pre-course survey to those in other critical care programs. Barriers included interdisciplinary conflicts, lack of local POCUS faculty, and lack of quality assurance programs. None of these barriers are solved by attending off-site courses. A few local POCUS experts first organized this course to fulfill the POCUS educational gap. As a result of the course, the institution recognized the need to strengthen the local infrastructure. Subsequently, a multidisciplinary POCUS consortium was formed, including leaders from PICU, NICU, PEM, cardiology, radiology, and hospital administration. Additionally, PICU, NICU, and PEM champions became the ultrasound medical directors for their divisions, providing ongoing. Our on-site pediatric neonatal POCUS course model has fostered interdepartmental collaboration, thereby promoting transparency in POCUS practice, communication, and eliminating concerns over multidisciplinary conflict. By the time this 12-month survey was sent to the 2019 course participants, the POCUS consortium had been established for 28 months, and the respondents reported no interdisciplinary conflict concerns. We suggest this internal on-site infrastructure is essential to effect change. Strengthening the POCUS infrastructure can help maintain an individual's POCUS proficiency, expand educational programs, develop quality assurance processes, develop re-credentialing standards, and sustain POCUS integration. So we think that this consortium has been mutually beneficial and would probably advocate that it could be helpful in other institutions. And hopefully we'll be able to write this paper up and get it published so that we can share that. So some of this POCUS strategies that I wanted to mention, kind of the title of this talk, are focusing on issues of transparency, collaboration, communication, mentorship, and leadership. And I think these strategies will help with all of the, with implementation, sustainability, all of the above issues. So the POCUS Consortium, I've already talked about that, but we do meet to discuss many different issues: administration, education, research, quality assurance, to help POCUS develop. Additionally, in the pediatric emergency department or division, we meet every 3 to 4 months with the division chief and do a quality improvement meeting to talk about ongoing POCUS issues and projects, focusing on PEM advancement, getting support from our local division chief so that there's an awareness, this concept of buy-in, acceptance of, and willingness to actively support and participate in something. So I think one of the overarching things is just collaboration, keeping people in the loop together. It will help progression. And then these ideas of, education, CME, retention, quality assurance, maintenance, troubleshooting. I think it's important to have, initially as you start, you may only have one ultrasound educator, but as your program grows, you should definitely develop that to get more people so that you don't have to do that all on your own. We offer 4 to 5 ultrasound lectures to the fellows in their educational conferences to help them get CME throughout the year. We provide the same as all of you, educational curriculums for PEM faculty and fellows, manage their POCUS logs for credentialing and retention, and perform quality assurance on all the scans and give them feedback. And then as our program has grown over the years, initially it was just myself and an ultrasound educator, Sasha Gordon, here the first couple of years. But as we were growing, we got another assistant ultrasound medical director to help with the workload, and then another ultrasound instructor to help, which is really helpful for load balancing, workload balancing. And then we kind of distribute the didactic lectures, and especially the hands-on scanning, which takes so much time to do hands-on scanning with providers. We do educate the global rural underserved child healthcare fellows, pediatric residents, the PEM fellows, et cetera, and the faculty. So kind of a snapshot up until this point of time. We've been fortunate that we have been able to provide POCUS training to 2 global rural and underserved child healthcare fellows that have gone on to global careers and rural careers. We were able to develop a pediatric elective, and we've been able to teach 16 pediatric residents. 20 PEM fellows have been trained. 15 PEM faculty have been trained. And through this collaboration with the NICU and PICU now, we've been able to educate approximately 50 to 60 PICU and NICU faculty. This next year in 2022, we will start a medical student class or elective for POCUS for these tribal, rural, underserved medical students that kind of are focusing their careers on tribal, rural, and underserved populations. So I think the future of POCUS, at least here, is really focusing on the medical students, which is in the process. We've had some nephrologists reach out. We've had a lot of global and rural underserved providers reach out, continue our collaboration with the NICU and PICU. At some point, if we have an advanced practice provider that really wants to learn POCUS, we'd be happy to teach them. We've been offering it for a long time, but it's a bit of a time commitment. Nobody has wanted to take that on unless we can perhaps pay them to do that. But all right, I only have 2 more cases. So case number 4, around spring 2020, a medical student asks, "Can I do a PEM POCUS elective?" You reply, "We have an elective for the pediatric residents." He replies, "I would love to do this elective if possible. What should you say?" He then says he thinks several of his classmates would also like to do a pediatric PEM POCUS elective. So possible options: A, no, wait until you're a resident. B, I think you can do the adult ED POCUS elective now. Why don't you just do that? C, you will have to go to another PEM program to do this. Or D, we could probably make this happen. So we tried to make this happen, and over the last year, we've been able to make this happen. Luckily, our adult ED colleagues have been doing this for several years, probably since around 2017 and perhaps even earlier. And at the University of Utah now, all the medical students get a handheld ultrasound device as they start. I think this went into effect last year. And like I said, the adult ED has been doing an amazing job at this, but we decided, especially after talking to some medical students, that a lot of medical students are interested in doing pediatric PEMPOCUS. So we've been able to create a course that we're going to be able to offer this next year, which we're really excited about. This is just a snapshot of it. It's preferentially reserved for the tribal, rural, and underserved certificate medical students, but it's also open to the senior medical students. And anyway, we are excited. We do think that this elective is distinctive in that it will be focused on using point-of-care ultrasound on infants, children, and adolescents. These interactions with children and their families are unique and require a different approach to successfully obtain and interpret images than perhaps in the adult world. As I was doing some research for this talk, I wasn't aware of this, but this AMA resolution fits really nicely in line that medical schools are really trying to do this vertical ultrasound curriculum. So although we were a bit slow to get this elective going, I'm glad that we are kind of jumping on the bandwagon. All right, this is the last case, and then I've got plenty of time for questions, I think. So a global health colleague says, I know we have been trying to collaborate on a POCUS project for a while, which we have for several years been trying to do something. I just heard from another colleague that we may be able to apply for an educational HRSA grant that could potentially allow for us to do some POCUS outreach in rural Utah. What do you say? A, that sounds interesting. Tell me more. I spelled that wrong. B, I am so busy I will have to pass. C, I don't think it will happen. D, what do we need to make this happen? So kind of A and D. We were able to apply for this HRSA grant, and we luckily found out that we got this in mid-August. So what we are doing with this HRSA grant is we're trying to identify 6 partner sites at tribal, rural, underserved locations in Utah, which I think we found 3 at this point in time, and we're still outreaching, trying to find more. But the goal is to implement primary care, point of care ultrasound, education and training in the general especially using medical students and the true medical students. And I kind of wrote, I blocked out our names just because I didn't ask everyone if I could talk about them. But over the course of this year, it's a strategic partnership with the tribal and rural health education and training sites, strengthened via the funding of this HRSA grant. The goals are implementation of a mutually beneficial, equitable, and reciprocal initiative to transform local primary care practice. The goal is to identify POCUS master trainers or champions at each partner site, and then sustainable POCUS programs at the partner sites. True program physician preceptors at partner sites with integrated POCUS into clinical care and medical student education and training. All of the University of Utah medical students are prepared to integrate POCUS during clinical education and training experiences. The true program student participants prepared to engage POCUS during clinical electives and clerkships at tribal, rural, and underserved sites. Demonstration of how medical centers can link community physicians in a sustainable way, including ongoing quality assurance, POCUS resources, and technology available with true program education training sites and all medical students. So in about a year, we should definitely have, I can perhaps in the future or at some point talk about this more, but we're going to kind of embark on this journey. We're really excited to start working with our tribal and rural providers and our tribal and rural medical students, and we'll see what happens. So just in summary, I think these next few slides are probably the most important of the talk. The lessons that I have learned, and some of the lessons I think others may be able to benefit from, are start with what you have, where you are. If you have no program or have a small program, start there. If no machine, get a machine. If no POCUS director, find one. Use the available resources, literature, and textbooks. There's so many great things that have come out since 2015 that is just amazing. Use those things. There's so many great educational resources you can use, so don't have to recreate the wheel. Many good online education resources available. Ask colleagues for advice and guidance, sharing curriculums, privileging pathways, quality assurance, pathways, proposals for machine acquisition, ask for help. One of the key points is slow and steady works. Meet often with leadership, especially the first 1 to 2 years, to obtain buy-in and awareness. I would advocate for continuing to meet with them, perhaps on a quarterly basis in a quality improvement meeting addressing POCUS issues. Be aware of how much time and effort you are devoting to this and let your leadership know. Discuss shift reduction options or other compensation if feasible. At the beginning, focus on training key players such as your division chief, your medical directors, fellowship directors, simulation directors, and especially the PEM fellows. I think focusing on these key people first as you're training your faculty will lead to rewards and dividends, as they'll be able to advocate POCUS to other faculty. Use the PEM fellows. I can't say that enough. Use the PEM fellows, residents, medical students as the primary focus. Really focus on them. This helps motivate attendings and vice versa. I'm sure all of you know this, but POCUS has a life of its own, especially as it grows. As it is building and gaining momentum, embrace assistance, ask for assistance. Don't do this alone if possible. Ask for administrative, secretarial support. If you need help with educational scans, find an ultrasound educator or sonographer to help with the scanning shifts. As the program continues to grow, you may need additional support. Try to distribute the workload as much as possible so you don't drown. Get an assistant ultrasound medical director, get an ultrasound instructor. If you need help with quality assurance or your institution requires this at first, when you're building your program, maximize your opportunities to build relationships for collaboration. Keep the big picture in mind. As your program gains momentum and grows, train the medical students if possible, and the residents, mentor your colleagues in other divisions as they build programs, collaborate with them, consider forming an institutional POCUS consortium that meets regularly. As your program develops, listen to the needs that arise, be adaptive. You may need to have other meetings to address other issues with your core PEM educators. As your program gains momentum and grows, share that information with your institution, do a grand rounds, share that information with other institutions, help other divisions with conferences if needed or possible, doing POCUS outside of your division as much as feasible or possible, helping other divisions, helping the medical school, helping other institutions, community, rural environments, global environments. Find and focus on things that interest you so you can maintain that excitement. Attend and participate in as many conferences, educational opportunities as possible. Keep learning, keep POCUS interesting, exciting, and evolving. Learn from each other. Help others and make POCUS accessible to others as much as possible. This last one is one that I feel like I'm still trying to learn. You can only run so fast. Try to keep it as much balance in your life as possible. Slow and steady works. POCUS has a life of its own. Collaborate harmoniously with others as much as possible. Try to not draw lines in the sand, but work with each other to collaborate and overcome hurdles and create pathways. This last slide is really just a summary that talks about everything I just said here, and that's it. That's all I got. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks so.
Can I? Matt, that was awesome. Thanks for sharing your insights and successes. Really commendable stuff. No questions in the chat box, but what I was going to throw out there is, could you remember a time where you actually had a setback and sort of how you overcame it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I started February 2015, and we didn't have a machine, and that was, one of the big goals. And met with, wrote proposals with the wrote a proposal, found proposals of people asking for ultrasound machines, kind of modified and adapted that. and submitted that and revised it a few times, and met with my division chief, and we submitted that to the department heads, and they said no, at least once or twice, and we just didn't give up. We kept meeting. I think they said something like, we need to know more, we need to learn more, we need to understand this more. So we ultimately met with the department chair, I want to say 3 or 4 times in 2015. We met with the department chair of radiology 3 or 4 times in 2015. And, I don't think people try to create barriers, but I think until they understand things. And sometimes it takes a few meetings with a department chair or division chief or a radiology department chair so that they know. I think, I imagine I would love to hear someone who started something in 2005 or 2010. I imagine in those times it was much, much harder. It was fairly hard in 2015. I would imagine with the wealth of literature that's been acquired over the last 6 years, this process is getting easier and easier as we now have policy statements, whereas 2005 and 2010 we didn't have these policy statements, and we have these guidelines and things. So I think, if anything, I thank the pioneers who have navigated these difficult waters and created these documents for us, because they're so helpful to be able to have these documents to show your leadership and administration. But yeah, you're definitely going to hit setbacks. I mean, that's one of probably 100 setbacks, but you just have to kind of slow and steady. I remember my division chief telling me that about 1 million times, just slow and steady, slow and steady, slow and steady, take small gains. And as you build it over time, they build on each other, and you get this momentum, and you get a core group of people, and this momentum builds, and you just have to ride the wave the best you can. That's the best I can answer that.
Matt,
Thanks
this
so
is
much.
Kate Denahan from Johns Hopkins. I had a question for you. I really appreciate this talk. I think it echoes what a lot of us who have come to divisions with no POCUS, no sort of preceding POCUS infrastructure have gone through. I was particularly curious to hear about any residency or medical school support that you are getting. It has increasingly been a demand for elective time with our PEDS residents, somewhat from the medical students, but really a huge increased demand that sort of exceeds what I have capability of doing right now, but also I'm sort of limited. It seems like the pediatric residency leadership doesn't see this as a huge educational need right now, despite what the residents are telling me. And I'm just curious to hear if you've gotten supports from them or how you have sort of negotiated that.
Hey, great question. Up until this point in time, we have not. I totally feel what you're saying. We've been having these discussions for a few years now. And it always seems like in academic medicine, everyone just calls it sweat equity, and you have to put in, several years of your time and efforts, and then demonstrate that something is successful. So I think over the years, we're acquiring that data now that we've had, I think after this year, we'll have 18 residents that will have done this. And we have one of our division meetings where we meet with our quality improvement division leader next week. And we're going to talk about this again and see, we've talked about trying to get money, but over the years, it's always been, we need to get more data. We need to have you do more residents to show that it's been, and so we've been collecting these pre-course and post-course evaluations for the education that the residents get and for the fellows. Show benefit, and then we have them fill out an evaluation. And we are planning on submitting all this and continuing to submit it. They might say no several times, but we're going to keep submitting it over the years until at some point, I think it's going to be realized that we should be getting some sort of financial benefit, or some more shift reduction or something, because like you said, you can only do so much. We've had to limit how many residents can do it. We used to let everybody do it, but then it just became too much for us. And now we only let 4 residents do it per year, but we always seem to end up accepting a couple extra because we're too nice. But and then the same thing with the medical students, we're only allowing 4 per year just because we don't have the bandwidth and time and resources. I am hopeful with the medical school. I have been, it's been hinted at that we probably, after we prove a little bit of sweat equity that we probably will be able to be, because medical students need to go to medical school, and some of that can be routed towards our division. So I am hopeful of that. The resident issue, it seems a little bit more nebulous, but we are going to keep meeting. I don't know if Medicare money or something could be routed towards our divisions for the labor and time, but those are great questions. I don't know if we know the answers completely. I know that my colleagues at the U who teach the medical students, they do get significant shift reduction, and they do get financial money from the medical school. However, I think they had to do some sweat equity for a couple of years and prove their worth. And now that they have, I think they do reap the benefits of it. But a great question.
Thanks. That's similar to what we're doing, and I appreciate just hearing what other folks are doing. So thanks for walking me through that.
Yeah.
Do we have time for another question?
Sure.
I'm Stephanie Cohen from Emory, Atlanta. We have gone through similar processes. We don't have such a cool title as the Pediatric Consortium. Our group is called PEPEC. It's the POCUS QA something or other. I don't even remember what it stands for. One of the some of the struggles I come up with is every time we have a new faculty member come in, they always say, "Oh, we want to do ultrasound. We want to do ultrasound," and we say, "Okay, come. We'll support you." And then we never hear back from them. So I'm curious as to what curriculum you have in place for your new faculty. And then you talked about mentoring outside of in other divisions. It's kind of fallen upon us that, you presented a model where you have a champion in those other divisions that you mentored and then they took over. In our system, there's no champion there, and they just kind of lean on us and expect they're expecting us to do QA for other divisions. And I'm just wondering what kind of support you received from other divisions when you started their mentorship.
Great questions. I'll try to address them all. So one of the things that's been helpful for us is definitely they've asked for a lot of mentorship and guidance. But I don't think it's sustainable to not identify a POCUS champion for each division. I think each division, it goes back to that MA book. It's inevitably going to fail if there's not. It won't be sustainable if there's not a POCUS champion. So I think that we have to help people understand that and see that we can help people as much as we want, but it's not going to work or be sustainable until they identify and find a POCUS champion. And until that becomes a priority to them, I just don't think it'll ever be very successful. We do one of the, we have a sonographer that's excellent, that's been doing it forever. And we actually pay her from some of our division money to help with some of the hands-on scanning shifts and things, because it is just so much time and effort. And I know the other divisions, the NICU and the PICU, are paying her to help, train some of their people, just because it is just so much time and effort. So I think having these discussions with your division lead, seeing if there's some funding that could be used to, use perhaps an expert sonographer to take some of the workload off of you, or getting some colleagues that can help. The question, I'm not sure I understood the first question, but I think it was something to the effect of, you get people that are excited about it, they want to do it, and then they sort of they lose their momentum. And I think that's a big thing for excitement. And then how do you maintain their momentum? We've seen this with a lot of our, we've probably had about 4 or 5 faculty that've been really excited and they want to do POCUS, and they start and they maybe do, they do a little bit, they watch few videos and maybe do a little bit of simulation, but then the reality of like actually having to put all those hours into scanning and things, they lose their momentum. And initially, as pathetic as this sounds, those first couple of years, I really held people's hands and really helped them through it. As the program has been growing over the last several years, I just don't have the bandwidth to hold every faculty person's hand and get them through that. So unfortunately, some of them have kind of faded into the background and haven't progressed. And I'm trying to wrap my head around the best way to, you know, help them. If I need to go back to the kind of the more the nudging and the hand holding to get them along. I think some of that's just, you know, we've had a few hospitals here and there who've been excited, and then they, you know, I think people, once they realize all the work and effort on their part it takes, I think we invariably do lose some people. And I don't know the right answer there, but you just do the best you can, I guess. We are focusing with this HRSA group that we're really trying to find champions at each facility. We're not going to offer it to them. Part of this HRSA grant gives them an ultrasound machine and I think 6 handheld devices.
Wow.
And so they're going to be given that for free, but we have to, we're making it a requirement that we have to identify a POCUS champion, because it won't become sustainable otherwise. So I think I can't say enough about how important it is to have a POCUS champion in each of these divisions to be successful.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. That talk was awesome and so important to think about, like the logistics of getting a program started, and really what you've been able to do is awesome. You started seemingly a program largely from scratch and really built into something that's collaborative across multiple different disciplines. So so kudos, and that's inspirational for someone like me who's planning to, well, graduating from a PEM POCUS fellowship in the near future. So thank you again for your time. Really
You're
appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Thank you.